I feel like the scope is generally, as with, early 20th century stuff, the scope is generally shorter, as this villain is like, I want Nikki, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah.
I mean, world domination? No.
No.
Girlfriend? Yes.
Yes.
Cinematic fantastic.
Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
I'll show you who I am and what I am.
Bitten by a werewolf and lives, becomes a werewolf himself.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to the Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Weatherford.
And your other host, William Weatherford.
Get ready for opinions, dad jokes,
and bad jokes
as we watch and review sci-fi and fantasy films from the classics of yesteryear to the new favorites of today.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever and whenever you are. Welcome to the 40th and last episode of Season 2 of Cinematic Fantastic. Today, we are doing 1943's Return of the Vampire, starring Bela Lugosi in his, frankly, last role as a top-billed actor.
Yeah, it probably is one of his last. He did get top billing when he was at Monogram, though, because that.
But what use is that? What use is that, though?
Because Monogram was making movies every week. They had a movie coming out every week, and so if they wanted you to go see it, they were like, "We got Bela Lugosi for 2 movies, so come see it."
Yeah, for those who don't know, Monogram as a studio was one of the down in the dumps sort of studios. They did everything really cheaply, just constantly spat out movies here and there every 2 weeks or so for as long as they lived, basically.
What they lacked in quality, they made up for in quantity. I mean, for sure. So I can't be down. Look. Here's the thing. Have I ever made a movie? Not really professionally, but I'm just saying the worst Monogram movie looks like professional compared to the junk that I used to put out. So I can't be mad at him for that.
Now, Bela Lugosi, as a person, was honestly, at this point, he was really trying to, further his career. But the thing is, Universal was not really doing that. They only really wanted him for, Dracula. And then after that, it was
mad scientists, vampires, and that's kind of it.
He was just the kook, while Dracula was double-dipping into many other studios as he was trying his very best to, keep his career going and launch himself despite the typecasting and Universal basically sort of ignoring him. And one of the ramifications of that is that Dracula's Daughter would have been a great movie if they actually had him in it. Unfortunately, they did not. They planned to. It
could have elevated
really quite
it.
worked, as
yeah.
From photos seeing them together. Honestly, it would have been great to see, they the two of them walking in that graveyard.
Yes.
We see, Bela Lugosi in a graveyard in this movie, but
he was in a movie called Mark of the Vampire.
He was in a movie called Mark of the Vampire, fairly around this.
But I thought it was but if I remember correctly, it was a fake out. They weren't really vampires. So he's a dude playing a dude who's actually another dude. So he's playing it's a reference to something. He's playing a guy playing a vampire who's not really a vampire. I don't know. I'm trying to remember if they really were vampires or was it a fake out and it made you think that they were or not.
But yeah, Bela Lugosi would never really be a vampire apart from Dracula and being Dracula in the plays. Because after all, as well as double dipping in other studios, he was also doing many different plays. He did the Dracula play as Dracula. That was how he got discovered, as he did that, and he continued doing that after
stuck with
Dracula.
It. But he played. Here's the thing: he's very tied to that character. When people think of Bela Lugosi, they think Dracula, right? He only played him for real 3 times. Let's see, what were they? It was Dracula.
This movie.
Well, he's not Dracula in this. Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He played Dracula, and I can't remember the second one where he played Dracula. Might have to help me out with that.
But the thing is this is all to say that this movie is really the return of the vampire, of Bela Lugosi, back into the limelight for sort of one last go.
He does okay. He does, and what do you? Okay, what do you think that he does an okay job at playing a? He's Dracula with a different name, and we'll talk about why that is.
Yeah, but he's got that mojo about him. And,
he does.
I will say why that is. It's because this movie was actually sort of going to be sort of a sequel to Dracula, but the thing is, Universal was hot on their tails going, oh no, you don't copyright, we'll wave the copyright stake in front of you and go, or the copyright hammer and go, well, if you're gonna do this, then we're gonna copyright strike
pound
you.
that metal stake into your heart, and you're just
Furthermore, Son of Dracula, which we will cover, I believe, the first episode of next season, they actually delayed this movie a little bit in order to not, brush up with Son of Dracula.
Right, and guess who plays Son of Dracula? Which really, it's called Son of Dracula, but he's still
that would be Lon Chaney Jr.
If that doesn't tell you that Universal is hitching their wagon for at least 3 or 4, 5, 6 movies to Lon Chaney Jr., that nothing else will. Because honestly, that would be perfect for him. But the thing is, though, Lon Chaney Jr. is much younger than Bela Lugosi, and so I think they're kind of looking for that new blood, so to speak, as a new blood sucker. And he plays. I'll just tell you, in Son of Dracula, he plays a character named Alucard. And and I know from Castlevania that Alucard backwards is Dracula. It's just, like somebody will like look at his name and it'll have a mirror nearby and like, Dracula, Alucard is Dracula backward. No.
Which is interesting because Dracula doesn't appear in mirrors.
No,
so maybe nothing will appear.
But the text does, so that's where people are like, oh my goodness.
But Bela Lugosi, unfortunately, for this one, would really not get paid all too much. This film is a B film.
How much did he get paid for 4 weeks of work?
I believe he got the same pay as he did Dracula, basically.
And this is years later. I'll bet you that he was able to do more with it back in the 30s.
Although you're the production wizard on this.
Well, I was thinking.
I believe it was like
3,500, something like that.
Something like that.
So 3,500. Now, even in today's, if you work for 4 weeks for $3,500, that's okay. But if you think about it, what was it back in 43? I'm not sure as far as how money worked out. It may have been pretty good.
It was definitely pretty good, but it's like, he could have been paid more. But that was, the original Dracula back then. Nowadays, now that they know that Dracula was actually going to be a seller, he probably would have done well with more money as he was more
marketable,
probably of more worth. Yeah. But the thing is, this movie actually did pretty well at the box office.
It did.
And that, of course, is because it was a cheap movie, yet it actually does not look that cheap, honestly. And that is because Columbia Pictures, who is the studio behind this, really has this reuse policy for their props and stuff, so that everything looks expensive, but yet they still save money because they reused it from other productions. They didn't compact it in the trash compactors or destroy any of it.
Yeah, they kept a lot of their stuff. Now
they kept a lot of their stuff and reused it, and quite wise ways.
Yeah, did you notice that this film feels kind of in certain scenes kind of claustrophobic, not very wide? Even the cemetery shots feel kind of like a little cramped. It feels like
that graveyard. Honestly, is a great set. It is honestly a great set.
It is pretty good.
I will say that.
So originally, the guy who wrote the story that was going to be optioned for this, Kurt Newman. It was the story was Vampires of London. It had to do with Dracula, but they had to change names according to to make the copyright thing work. And they had delayed the production, and so they couldn't get Newman to direct. He had to go do something else. But it got replaced with Lou Landers, whose full name is Louis Friedlander. But of course, you want to change it to not sound. I in my mind, I kind of guessed, it may not be right, but I was kind of guessing he didn't want to sound too Jewish. It's 1943. You didn't want to sound too Jewish. So Louis Friedlander is now Lou Landers. You see what I'm saying? So that's just my guess, though, based upon some other choices other directors had made, and some people changed names and things like that. Lou Landers directed The Raven with Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff. So he had some experience with them.
He had some definite chops with great Bela Lugosi and great Boris Karloff.
He's done he did a lot of movies. Even after this.
Edgar Allan Poe stories definitely would have some atmosphere to it.
Yes, but I'll tell you, remember as we talked about during the Black Cat episode, go check it out. It was early in season 2, I think, wasn't it?
That was literally our first episode.
It was. As we noted, a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stuff was not
Of season 2,
of
that
season
is.
2, that is, yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe stuff was not
No,
accurate.
it wasn't. And of course, as we talked about the Raven, it doesn't use the quoth the Raven nevermore. It only
Yeah, they transformed a poem into a psychological biography.
well, it's a torture. The character played by Bela Lugosi is a Poe freak, and he has like an underground torture chamber thing that he's built as art pieces or whatever in honor of Poe. He almost worships Edgar Allan Poe, and it turns out he tortures with these devices. He captures everybody and brings them down there. So it's like it's like pre Saw. Does that make sense? Like Saw before Saw.
I guess
It's
so.
pretty good, but
to sort of return
Yes.
back. Yeah, Universal was going to be like, if you plagiarize our stuff, we will throw the hammer down. So they try their best not to plagiarize.
You gotta change the names, yeah. So it's not Count Dracula, it is Armand Tesla. Now, they filmed at Columbia's Gower Studios for most of the scenes, but scenes with the cemetery stuff, I guess I was wrong. The cemetery stuff was not too cramped. In fact, it doesn't feel as cramped as the other sets because they filmed those at the Fine Arts Studio. So they moved that out.
Yeah, I would say that one's not cramped at all. All the other ones are definitely sort of smaller rooms.
Do you remember that Boris Karloff could not do Ghost of Frankenstein because he was doing Arsenic and Old Lace?
Yeah,
Bela
he was
Lugosi
in
was
that
doing
too.
Arsenic.
Bela Lugosi was doing Arsenic
At
and Old
night.
Lace
He
as
was
well.
doing it at night, so he was very sleepy. So he would take naps in the coffin.
Oh, that's funny.
Also, yeah, you're right. It was held back for, to not compete with Son of Dracula. And the thing is, though,
So they released it that January, I believe.
yes. They did want to have a sequel called The Bride of the Vampire that was going to have Bela Lugosi and Nina Foch, who plays Lady Ainsley, have her back. But what I don't understand is, I know that in the Hammer movies, there are times where you see Dracula get killed, and he's even like turned to ash or powder, and somebody drops blood on him, and it wakes him back up. But that was creative. But I don't know how Columbia Pictures was going to resurrect Armand Tesla. We'll talk about that when we get to the plot portion, why that is. To be honest, a lot of the acting in this is okay. A lot of the production is good.
I feel like there were definitely a lot of great people in this. Obviously, we had some, like those two comedic people.
Yeah, the Gravediggers, they did okay. They kind of reminded me of like the old James Whale movies and some of those other, and those constables. I think that one of the guys with the mustache, I think he played a constable, a Bobby.
All of them were actually very solid, except for I noted one of the ladies. I believe it was either Nikki or the vampire huntress of this movie.
Well, I thought Lady Jane did okay.
Then I'd say Nikki was more.
Nikki was the one. Nikki does have a good line where she talks about being in love with the
But
knight.
very stilted actor.
Yeah, it comes and goes really fast.
The one thing, though, in this movie is that the pacing is immaculate.
It is.
honestly
It does
sort
move.
of
This
is.
movie moves. I mean, for an hour, it's an hour long.
The pacing. Okay, if you want to have one thing to think about this movie for like the biggest pro is that the pacing is honestly, it was great. It was actually great. I was like, man, I'm getting excited for some of this stuff.
Yeah, it does
all
slow
the
down.
stuff.
It does slow down a little bit toward the end.
I feel like the scope is generally as with, some of the early 20th century stuff, overall the earlier half, is that the scope is generally shorter, as this villain is like, I want Nikki, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Yeah.
I mean, world domination? No.
No.
Girlfriend? Yes.
Yes. It sounds like some of the earlier. And here's the thing: the
But
comparison.
the pacing is
It
immaculate.
is very, very good.
The scope could be better.
Well, there
but
are.
it'll get better as the years go, but pacing.
Okay, like a cover band that does like that goes, hey, they're not the original artist, but they're playing cover songs of the original artist, and they do it their best way possible, and they may put their own spin on it.
This was Columbia going, oh,
we can do
Universal's
Universal,
doing this.
right?
We can do Universal.
And they did.
And so they tried Universal, and they did.
Very close. The only thing it's missing is like
I would say, in fact, they did a better job of being Universal than Universal sometimes.
in some of the later stuff, yeah.
They did better than, at least for the post-code stuff. The pre-code stuff, they were actually, starting to get more at a decade later into the Hays Code stuff,
Yeah.
when censorship was rampant.
Yeah, well, the UK was still horror hardcore censoring stuff. Like they really gave this thing a rating H for horrific, which is funny. I would love to write a book called H for horrific. They did that because there is a scene where Armand Tesla like melts. And there's one where you see the steak go into him.
Yeah, he melts at the end. Honestly, that was
cool.
Like, honestly, that is one of the things I say that this was better Universal than Universal themselves.
In some way. In
Never have we
ways.
seen. There was, even though it wasn't in the same franchise, The Invisible Man Returns had that scene where the character was slowly going back from being invisible, and it was like this drawn style. And honestly, that was a great
cool.
effect. This was honestly the only thing that matched something like this. This is like Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark style.
Melting the face. Yeah. Well, honestly, I think they probably cut a little bit because it was a little bit. They showed a little bit of the melting, and then they showed the after effects. But
well, yeah, they sort of did a montage-y effect, but I think it was actually sort of the same method. It's got make a wax face of Bela Lugosi, melt it, just like they did in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Honestly, that honestly surprised me. I was like, man, this movie actually, had the gall to do some of that stuff.
Plus,
while Universal,
what are some other things they copied?
I guess had their image.
Well, we did not get a Skinner. What's his name? Skinner. The score could have been a lot better. The guy who did the score ended up actually teaching composition, and one of his students was the guy who did the music for the early Star Trek movie, and also the Star Trek theme. That's interesting. I think it really could have done with one of those scores, but again, Skinner was working hardcore for Universal. He's kind of a lot of those guys were just tied into the production company that had them. So the other thing that I was going to say is, in some improvements over Universal stuff, is it has a Renfield character in Andreas, and he is a werewolf guy. He's not just a Renfield where he's just like, Master, I'm gonna do this, whatever. He's actually like a supernatural creature. I honestly think that maybe they heard that there was going to be a Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and so they were like, hey, let's do that too.
Or they just heard of the Wolfman and went, let's make a Wolfman character instead of ripping off directly from Dracula.
Yes,
and it honestly is a fresh take upon that. And like comparing the Wolfman to Andreas Obry, honestly, if it's not pronounced Obry,
Obry, one of the two.
Obry sounds a little it sounds a little dull. Obry sounds to me sounds a lot more elegant. Andreas Obry. But whatever. Andreas, honestly, I feel like he's scarier in many aspects than the Wolfman, and only because he is so much more human. He's so much more like, this is a guy who is suffering under a curse, instead of he's the Wolfman.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing that I liked about Lon Chaney Jr.'s Wolfman is that he's more savage, and he doesn't have control. The thing about this guy is I do feel a little bit more sorry for him, but because he's actually talking and saying what he's doing. He does do some horrible things. I mean, he killed a couple guys and threw them at the bottom of the river.
Yeah, the thing is, this guy is, he's still human. He is still human by day, werewolf by night. That's probably not what I would say. He's a human who's cursed to be the way he is. And he's sort of like this physically deformed person by curse. I might cite this because we watched it recently, but Howl's Moving Castle, the main character is afflicted with a curse to be an old woman, except for some specific times when she turns young again, although I don't exactly understand the exact conditions of that, and I can't state that this time. But he was this physically deformed person, and he's talking whispers. He's like, master, he's this part person yet part animal at the same time, because after all, he was freed from the curse. He finally freed himself, but then he got forced right back into it.
Yes.
And honestly, the scenes at the end where he did his great part, he had a character arc, man.
He really did. He
had a character arc.
He did. He saved the day, basically, and gave his life, if you want to spoiler alert.
That's what ultimately ended up with that. But honestly, yeah. Speaking of the ending, that ruined cathedral, burned down sort of set.
Yeah.
Honestly, I gotta say, this is one of my favorite endings of all the movies that we've done so far, at least in the season.
Oh, there's lots of really good
with
endings.
like Bela Lugosi face melted in this like cathedral. Honestly, yeah, the pacing really helped this movie and that ending.
And the connection to current events. I mean, we had Invisible Agent that was a connection to stuff that was happening right
like
then.
it just has such a strong story that
Bela
is surprising
Lugosi,
compared.
I'll give him these flowers. Is that he has a better command of his English pronunciation of things than he did in Dracula in 1930s. But his charisma, you could tell he's headed downwards in his career. He still has it. But if it's a ripoff of Universal, you couldn't ask for a better ripoff, to be honest.
Yeah, honestly, it's just such a.
It has lots of charm,
breaker.
though. It has nods to the conventions, but then it breaks the convention. It goes with the normal Universal style, and then it goes, we're going to do this a little bit different. Like, did you notice the thing that Dracula can do in the books, which is change into mist? The mist thing where he turns into...
Yeah, we actually saw some of that.
He turns
in this
into
movie.
mist and goes right at Nikki as a little girl, and you're like, yikes.
Also, I
that's
believe
creepy.
this was like one of the only like instances we really have of Dracula in general, like going after a child.
And it
He
shows
did a
the
child in this
fang
movie, I
marks
believe,
on the...
if not Mark of the Vampire.
Yeah, it shows the fang marks on the neck. I think that's probably another reason, those kind of wounds is another reason why it got the bad rating
And
in UK.
to come back to Andreas, is that, compared to Renfield was, like, loyal all the way through, and Dracula, saw no need for him and had to, off him, and then, like, that's how he went. But in compared to this one, this is actually this human who is wanting to actively resist the control of Tesla.
Yes.
I guess I can remember that
Yeah.
by, the Nikola Tesla.
Yeah, or the vehicles. Yeah,
That
Elon
would be
Musk.
cool if we had a Return of the Vampire where, like, this vampire had, like, electricity powers, a la the Emperor from...
from Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi specifically, but you could also say Revenge of the Sith.
Yes.
Was trying to remember the one Mace Windu was in.
Yes.
Or he might have been Attack of the Clones.
Yes.
Yeah.
He looked very vampiric there too. But showing a vampire prince showing their power over sorcery, or even just sorceress powers. A lot of that stuff, and you don't see that as much with different portrayals.
So the main resistance against Tesla is the vampire huntress, Lady Ainsley, who is played by Freda Nescord. What do we think of her? It's honestly a big shift up from people we've had, such as from Dracula.
Yes, she's a Scottish-born actress. She did a lot of Broadway. She was in Pride and Prejudice back in 1940. She played Carolyn Bingley. So I
guess she was pretty popular.
People like that
in,
a lot.
That sort of space.
She did a lot of Broadway, credits from the 1920s on up until that. Even then after, she would go back. You start off a lot of times. We've said this before. We start off a lot of times on the stage, go to movies, and it's still your first love. So you go back to it even after these movies. She was going back to the stage, because you love it. You love it.
But compared to Edward Van Sloan, honestly, she is sort of a shake-up with this.
She is almost like a female Van Helsing, because she reads the information. She kind of gets convinced by Dr. Saunders, in the 1918 scenes of what the vampire can do. And it's strange, but Armand Tesla in the movie, he actually writes a book about vampires and what they can do and how they can be found out. They kind of hint that he got in too deep, and after he died, he became a vampire himself. That's an interesting origin story that I'm not sure I have seen. But as far as this is, I was first going, okay, so why is it, if Armand Tesla is a vampire, why is he telling people how to kill him? He's like his own worst enemy. But really, he wrote it when he was a human, I think, in the 1700s or something, got turned, and now he's the guy. Saunders convinces Lady Jane Ainsley, played by Freda Nescord, that of what a vampire can do, how to find them out, that they do exist, and she's convinced of it, and in fact goes with Dr. Saunders in Van Helsing style to go pound a stake into the vampire's chest back in 1918. Of course, that doesn't take, so to speak.
And I feel like Freda Nescord...
Van Helsing's pretty sweet.
Comparing, what do you think of her compared with Bela Lugosi?
I think she kind of, takes him on, once she actually confronts him, dealing with this other person that she doesn't know is Armand Tesla, then Armand Tesla is revealed. She's very like holding her own. She's not a female in distress or she's scared all the time. She's kind of like, well, we're going to do this, She even comes up with a plan to lure Armand Tesla in and get him with his weakness. I kind of think that's pretty cool, and it's a little bit ahead of its time. What's not ahead of its time, and I don't think that everybody has a really good, how do I put this, a really great way of doing this, is old person makeup. I mean, we saw this in Mummy's Tomb where we had old person makeup on both the main character, Steve Banning, and Babe, Jensen Hansen.
And honestly, those were actually, it was honestly
I think they're
pretty
not
sensitive makeup,
afraid
though.
with kind of old-defying guys. I think with women, they're still kind of like, okay, how do we do this and still have her be
Without making her like really wrinkly
attractive?
old grandma.
Yeah, they still wanted this attractive female to be on the posters or whatever, along with Bela Lugosi. So they didn't have a handle on old person makeup for ladies yet, I don't think. So it doesn't come across very well. But otherwise, I thought it was pretty good that she's a female scientist and she wants to stop this vampire. Usually it's a dude. Sadly enough, I will tell you about Frida Enniscorth. I know we all have sad tales to tell. She had multiple sclerosis, which is actually your body is breaking down and your mind is the last to go, really. And she did work very hard to get multiple sclerosis research funded and things like that, but she passed away at 74.
But I mean, Bela Lugosi would die at 50, and honestly, with a legacy,
A
I
Lugosi
feel like, yeah,
legacy?
he was constantly
Did
trying.
you say a Lugosi legacy? No.
I said honestly.
Oh, I thought you said legacy.
He had a Lugosi.
Yeah.
That he was honestly trying to catch the waves of. But honestly, I feel like Universal wasn't really doing them. I feel like, now that I think about it, I think they liked Boris Karloff way more. Because, we saw him in so many more of the things that Universal has been doing. They saw more potential in Boris Karloff, while Bela Lugosi was sort of on the sidelines. Because what more could you do with him? Another vampire?
Well, let's just put it this way. I hate to say this,
some
but
hobo?
I do think that, strangely enough, two things kind of hampered Bela Lugosi. One of them is typecasting connected with Dracula.
And generally, being his
language. Well, I would say this.
His origin really didn't help because he had such thick accent.
Yeah. And Boris Karloff could pull off a British accent, and he could pull off an American if he needed to.
And maybe even a Chinese one in some case.
Oh, he played Fu Manchu.
Chinese in quotes, because there isn't really any Chinese
Yellowface,
accent.
yay!
That's what we call an offensive accent.
It is offensive, but you have to judge those things based upon the merit of what they're in, rather than how they would reflect by today's morals. Because to be honest, you're going to miss out on a lot of really interesting movies if you just kind of chuck things out because they don't fit today's really uber progressive mindset.
And so you said there was Mark of the Vampire, Turn of the Vampire, and one other movie that were the last vampire movies that he really did, or the only other than
it wasn't
Dracula?
the last. Well, he plays Dracula 3 times total, I think. I can only remember 2 of them. I don't know why I saw that somebody said 3. I honestly I saw that on a webpage and I can't shake it out of my head.
Well, 3 might be Dracula and then 2 others.
Yeah, well, it's Dracula, Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, because Dracula is controlling Frankenstein's monster in that. And then there's one more.
Oh, here's one that says Old Mother Riley meets the vampire.
That's just a vampire movie. He either played vampires or mad scientists, or a guy that was secretly trying to kill. Now sometimes he did play. Remember the Invisible Ray? He was not like the big villain heavy. He was just somebody who Boris Karloff was going to take revenge on.
Yeah, because Boris Karloff was he was the main macho man in that regard.
He did. You were right. He did not. Lugosi did not get any more top billings. Not higher than Lon Chaney Jr.
But I mean, in this time he would be, Monogram.
PRC.
He'd be PRC. Which, in case you didn't know, we covered
Poverty Row type stuff.
That studio was the bottom of the barrel, production, releasing, corp.
Yeah, you're right. But a lot of those movies, though, we're gonna see some of those coming up, probably even next season. The Ape Man. where Bela Lugosi is turning into a monkey man.
Yeah, they relegated him to stuff like the gorilla, and Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn ape. That is.
Yeah, or Zombies on Broadway. Yeah,
Yeah,
just,
I couldn't remember the name of that.
yeah, and
Like, you want to see Bela Lugosi juggle 4 balls?
Right.
You want to see Bela Lugosi, balance a fork on his nose?
yeah,
Cool.
But here's
That was really what he was
that's what it felt like.
to.
But the thing is, though, he never got the success that he probably felt that he deserved. He was kind of drowning his sorrows in methadone and morphine. So, which eventually, ultimately, was his undoing, and his addiction is what got him killed.
So, if we got through some all the production material yet, or do we need to go on to the cast?
I don't have a lot to say about the rest of the cast. I would say Nina Foch. She was a lot of horror pictures and film noir. She was also in Cry of the Werewolf, I think.
Which would have been like the sequel to this movie, but
Yeah,
then they
but it
turned it
wasn't,
into
yeah.
Cry of the Werewolf.
Don't remember where I've seen Nina Foch before, but I do remember.
Speaking of werewolf, his makeup was pretty great.
It was, and it does get used again.
Makeup and especially effects. Especially that effect of the Bela Lugosi
It gets
face melting.
the werewolf makeup actually gets used again in another movie.
It is fairly generic, I will say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good makeup, but it's also like it looks like a bit like Chewbacca.
It's now I can't unsee
you were
it.
saying earlier that he looked like a German terrier.
Oh, it's Scottish Terrier.
Scottish terrier, sorry.
Like he's like, I'm a dog, and I love being a dog.
No, that would be a German Shepherd. Honestly, that would be like a crossbreed.
There is
German
a werewolf. There
Terrier.
is a movie with a werewolf in it that looks like a
Imagine
German
if there was,
Shepherd
like, a werewolf
Yeah.
parody, but the werewolf was like doing the polka, so it was like standing up on its hind legs and like doing the dances stuff. That would be hilarious.
That would be ridiculous.
I guess.
So
Because it would subvert
I
expectations.
remember what Nina Foch played was the Pharaoh's daughter Bithia in the Ten Commandments, Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments.
Yeah,
I used to watch
honestly, compared to this movie, you could count all of the number of the cast on your hand versus like that movie.
Yeah, that movie was like hundreds of thousands of dollars to make. This one was like 75. They spent 75,000 to make Return of the Vampire, and they got
But honestly,
and they made back double its.
Made back like 5 times.
Yeah, that's
I
right. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And honestly, that was because of how cheap of a studio generally it was, and how they could get away with that due to their reuse method that I discussed earlier.
Yes, absolutely. So I don't know a lot about
Speaking
any
of which,
of the.
there is some stuff to talk about Columbia. If you don't have
Columbia Pictures. I don't think we've done anything for them before.
Yeah, we haven't. This is our first one.
Won't be the last.
People would often know them in the modern era for them being owned by Sony, so they would do a lot of different Sony stuff, like Sony Animation would be all lumped in there. All the Spider-Mans, Collide with a Chance of Meatballs, both of those movies were done by Sony Animation.
Men in Black, Ghost Rider, Ghostbusters.
So many Ghost movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Steven Spielberg did stuff with them.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which we will do quite a bit of Columbia movies as we go forward. We'll have to keep an eye out.
It's weird how similar they seem to like Warner Brothers and MGM in terms of like theming. Maybe it's because they're all like orange, brassy colored mascots.
Well, you got the famous torch lady. You know, the lady with the torch.
But History of Columbia, they actually started way earlier in the silent era as the founders were Harry and Jack Cohn. Along with Joe Brandt, I think he'd be later. No, that would be the three of them. That'd be Cohn Brand Cohn Film Sales Corporation. CBC, which was the sounds really similar to CBS or something. That was their original name. They were in the silent era. They did a lot of short subjects, which is what they called, short movies back then. They called them short subjects. Fairly low budget. Had some stuff with Billy West, who was a Charlie Chaplin imitator. The studio actually had some reputation that some joked that CBC stood for corned beef and cabbage.
Right, because of the
were,
reputation at the time, yeah.
Because of their reputation. And last film seemed to be released was Innocence. It was Lost. That made me think of the Duty Bird did Birth of the Nation, the other film he did.
That was
Intolerance.
Intolerance, yeah.
I was like, Innocence, that sounds like Intolerance. But corned beef and cabbage could not do, so they renamed themselves to Columbia Pictures. Harry Cohn assumed the role of president in 1932, and actually I think one of the other ones was was the president for the longest to date. Although I think one of the dudes at Warner Brothers was who had gone to presidency in 50.
Was that Jack Warner?
Yeah, Jack Warner maybe was president longer, but at a later date. So at this time, you could say that he was the longest ever at 36 years, I believe.
So what really got them recognized and started getting upward climb probably in the late 20s on into right before the 40s was a man named Frank Capra, famous director. He's the same. He's the same guy who did It's a Wonderful Life. Frank Capra did It's a Wonderful Life. He did a lot of movies with Jimmy Stewart, James
Stewart.
Stewart.
Honestly grew Columbia with his films, and since the late 1920s, with It Happened One Night. In 38, B.B. Kahan joined as vice president, leading to notable films like those High Great Walls, The Lady in Question. Columbia often borrowed some contract stars from our studios, earning the nickname Siberia at Metro Goldwyn Mayer.
Right, Louis.
I guess because
Louis B. Mayer was like, if somebody's not a very obedient actor, they're not doing what I want them to do, we'll loan them out to Columbia, aka Siberia. The old joke is if you're going to go to jail, we're going to put you in jail in the worst place on earth, which is Siberia. So they're basically saying, that's where we're exiling you to the frozen waste. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. Not much in the 1930s. In the 1940s, they experienced significant success partly due to the wartime audience because they were out there watching movies, buying them popcorn. As we discussed, there were a lot of those war advertisements and news that you could get there, as well as, the escapism that you could get from the war with fantastical pictures and romances that you could think of anything other than war. Although they did put war in a lot of the movies, and in this movie as well, in some mentions. So maybe they couldn't ever really truly escape war.
Well, I would also say that a lot of the stuff that Columbia could get produced and get seen in a lot of theaters were shorts. Yeah, Buster Keaton.
Hanna-Barbera was actually had a lot of stuff to do with.
Yeah, Columbia distributed those back in the 50s. Yeah, absolutely.
And Hanna-Barbera would be the Flintstones. Would be did they do Yogi Bear?
Yeah. Yogi Bear, a lot of those. You can name it. Huckleberry Hound, all those kind of. Yeah, absolutely.
Jetsons.
Yeah. But that was
they get to Jetsons.
That was much later on. Absolutely.
And they had a lot of contract actors, including Glenn Ford, Penny Singleton, William Holden, Judy Holliday. The Three Stooges. They were actually the forefront of the Three Stooges.
Yes, they were.
And the Three Stooges were quite very high especially with comedy.
Yeah, and you could show those before the big movie even started. So you already got some movie theaters that would go, okay, we'll take the shorts, and then Columbia was going to get some play even in theaters that they didn't show some of their big movies in, but they could.
You've got the thing like the game where like you put the like a little tiny ball in like the three like plastic cups, and then like you switch them around and you have to guess which one.
Yeah, three card Monty or whatever.
That's basically how you could describe like a Three Stooges.
Right.
Is they're constantly banging on the heads of everyone, interacting and getting into goofy shenanigans, risking their relationship with each other.
To give you a quick background on the Three Stooges,
because that was your.
That was my childhood.
Jam.
It started out. That's because they were all public domain at the time, and so you could watch. People would put out videotapes with those on them, and they didn't have to pay the Three Stooges for it, which is funny. That's how come I saw them, because you go to the dollar. You buy like a $1 VHS. It would have like 6 episodes on it, and I had a couple of those at home. So the Three Stooges were like started out on vaudeville. Vaudeville was it was on stage, smaller theaters. People would just go in there and just listen to the music, laugh at the jokes. You had a lot of comedians who would perform on vaudeville type stuff. There was something called the Borscht Belt, which was actually done from the Catskill Mountains down, where it was a lot of Jewish comedians got their start in there. This is where you get the kind of the comedic stylings of Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, who did Spaceballs and a lot of those other movies. Young Frankenstein. The thing about that kind of comedy is it appealed to a lot of different people, but it was just really a lot of Jewish actors and comedians got their start there. And of course, the Three Stooges Stooges are mostly Jewish. I think one of them might not be Jewish, but I think they're mostly Jewish guys, and that's where they started out. That's just a quick little snippet, Three Stooges introduction.
50s. They discontinued some of its popular series films, like The Lone Wolf, Crime Doctor, Rusty, Jungle Jim. Was the only one that kept going through 55. Jungle Jim was sort of like that Tarzan knockoff, and I believe you said
but it was
that,
more like
had Johnny
Weissmuller. And it wasn't necessarily a Tarzan knockoff as it was the Tarzan actor, but he's like wearing explorer gear. Like he's more like a explorer Indiana Jones
So
type.
like G.I. Joe meets Tarzan. G.I. Joe out in the safari.
More like safari guy meets Tarzan. Yeah, that's right.
Stuff like From Here to Eternity, On the Waterfront, Bridge to the River Kwai.
Those are Oscar winners.
With Alec Holden and Alec Guinness.
Yeah,
of the Guinness Book Records, Alec Guinness.
Do you know who Alec Guinness is?
No, other than...
Well, wait a minute. Let me help you out with that. Of course I know it. He's me. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Oh, that's cool.
Alec Guinness, famously...
It's weird that he's named after, the Guinness Book of Records and stuff.
No, he's not named after that. But Guinness is a Scottish name, and so that's the Guinness Book of World Records comes from a family of people with the last name Guinness. So Guinness is a very common Scottish name. So that's but it's funny that you connected those two.
Oh, they also did an adaptation of 1984, which was the George Orwell film. Honestly, it'd honestly be interesting to see how that compared to like I believe it was the later film that came out maybe in the 70s to 90s that
80s
actually had a lot 80s. Yes, that'd be funny if 1984 came out in 1984.
Well, it was more faithful. The second one was more
more
faithful
of the atmosphere.
to the book.
Yeah,
the book
more
is,
of the world building and more of like the costumes are correct.
The book is something that they don't go into extreme detail about the appearance of everything. So there's a lot of ways that you can kind of interpret it from the book to the screen.
But in one thing I saw was that in the 80s they actually got bought out by Coca-Cola, which is weird because it's like the drink people. They did drinks. Okay, the Coca-Cola.
Well,
themselves.
they acquired shares of it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they and they wouldn't put like Coca-Cola presents
regardless,
movies.
It's still interesting.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Well, I mean, knowing Coca-Cola, they could do Coca-Cola present. I mean, they did that for like the Super Bowl.
And they did. Well, the Columbia acquired a lot of different sub things like TriStar and a lot of different other production companies and got a lot more movies for underneath their banner. There were some really good movies: Gandhi, Tootsie, Karate Kid, The Big Chill, Ghostbusters.
Oh, they actually also bought the people behind Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy.
A lot of TV shows, yeah.
That stuff, which is also probably going to grow their name quite as well because Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, those are honestly like some of the two most famous shows in like the history of game shows.
Absolutely. But Columbia Pictures, became its own like solid thing. I think probably from '87 on.
Yeah, when Sony bought
them in '89. But a lot of the things that we're going to be looking at movies in the future, luckily the aforementioned Spider-Man movies with Sam Raimi movies.
Definitely a lot of Spielberg.
Yeah.
A lot of '60s stuff that they did. Although we'll be parked in the '50s for quite a while before that.
We are gonna see some Columbia movies coming up, like it came from
they
Beneath
get
the
to
Sea.
like the Spider-Man trilogy, the Da Vinci Code, Monster House,
Yeah,
Casino Royale.
That was the reboot of the with the 007 series.
Oh, they also did Open Season, which was it's honestly Open Season
okay.
is really weird entry in this because it's like this animated
It's
trying
pretty
to
forgettable.
copy, the Madagascar.
Well,
Shrek,
Open
stuff
Season made me think of another movie called Over the Hedge. That I thought it felt like a copy of that.
Yeah. I confused those two in the commercials. I was like, it's this random group of animals going out homeward bound style on juvenile shenanigans.
Yes. Well, I mean that
the Norm of the North. Honestly,
I hate that. That's one of the worst movies ever.
Worst series of movies ever, and infamous in the online community.
Yeah, but we've really gone into detail about Columbia, so hopefully you guys have. We'll probably refer back to this episode a lot when we talk about other Columbia movies.
It's sort of a retrospective over who Columbia was.
It is. We haven't talked about them yet, and we really have. But we will probably dip into some other aspects of Columbia as we go, like especially when we get to Spider-Man movies and who owns the rights to what and what kind of fights were over that. Those are almost very interesting to talk about.
almost interesting.
Yeah.
But not interesting enough to talk about today.
Not today.
Today we talked about quite a couple of interesting things, sort of glossed over a lot of the various different elements of this movie, sort of what we liked about them. I'm honestly gonna rewatch this movie. How about you? I'm gonna rewatch this movie.
I did recently.
One of the strongest things about this movie was the pacing and just the story, the elements and the story, just all of that. The story was quite strong.
And it felt like another Universal movie. I was like, this feels like, old school Universal.
Like, most people haven't even heard of this movie. We hadn't even heard of this movie. We hadn't even had it on our list until we were like, we need to shift a couple of movies around because we've been doing a lot of that recently. Quite a lot of that recently. So we needed something there. And then we were like, oh, what was Bela Lugosi in 1943? And we found this movie, and we were like, oh, actually, that seems like interesting.
Well,
if not for that, we will discover this gem.
The other Bela Lugosi, we'll see Bela Lugosi quite a few more times in some Universal movies that are okay, and some not Universal movies that are probably going to be, I wonder if they're going to be on the level of the Ape. And, I know that you're like, oh boy, oh no, but kind of part of me is going, oh boy, because we have some of the best fun with some of the worst stuff.
But in this case, quite an underrated movie, quite hidden in the space
It's a hidden
of things.
gem.
People are more concentrating on, the Universal lineup and Boris Karloff and
Lon Chaney Jr. stuff going forward, yeah.
the House of Stuff. Everyone was like, Son of Dracula in 1943, but everyone glanced over this movie, and most people don't even know this movie existed.
Well, it did
So
okay.
honestly,
It did pretty good at the time. So people
check it out. I will tell you, check it out, and you will have a great experience. What they accomplished was quite surprising.
It took some swerves. It took some chances.
So until then, I will have a good plot for you guys then, and we'll be able to dig into, how this story really, one-upped Universal in many respects. It's not perfect. It's not
of course not.
movie.
Of course not. But it's
many of the acting could be better, and many of they could have increased the scope. That might be asking too much for the age or the budget, and the people they could get to write this stuff.
100% right.
But why it's a straight A? We'll go into that next segment.
We'll take a break. We'll come back and we will go over the plot of The Return of the Vampire from 1943.
Yep. I curse you into becoming a werewolf, and you will be a werewolf until the end of the season.
Well, let's nail down.
Tune back for what's gonna happen next in the next segment.
Close enough. All right, see you then.
But in the meantime, here's an advertisement.
Keep bloodsuckers away with Nosferatu View doorbell cameras. Our bleeding-edge technology reveals the undead lurking at your door before you even reach for the handle. Keep away the uninvited. Nosferatu View. Garlics got nothing on us. From Van Helsing Co. Leasing is required if used by a Catholic church. Fines apply if used illegal.
Welcome back after the break. This is the final episode of Season 2. I'm excited. It's kind of exciting in terms of being a relief. Would you echo that? Do you think that that's kind of how you feel about it?
It is honestly quite a relief to, having very little time over weeks to be able to be creating these, and then finally going like, we're done. It's been a month since the last one, but we're done.
Yeah, it's time to kind of end season. It's an ending, but it's also a beginning. Which
But don't
I'm not
fault
gonna...
us for putting them out casually. So...
Yeah. I think you should be the announcement guy, because I think that I just thought it'd be a good idea, and you're going to be kind of leading it.
because we're going to announce, the next bonus month, all sorts of cool stuff and plans that we've been brewing for after the season ends. But we have a vampire to be returning, I guess.
Right.
As I said, the freshest take on Dracula, the Dracula formula, done to a T that honestly Universal hasn't done, and surprising.
Well, they don't know what to do with Bela Lugosi.
But the number one thing I took away from this movie is how engaging it is. It really engaged me from all sorts of different elements. The story is very engaging compared to some others that were and then we've been in a sort of a drought later this season with all of the sequels and stuff being not as engaging at all, really. This movie struck me as engaging, and sort of compelling.
That is the watchword of this whole episode that we're doing is engaging.
Yes, exactly. That's the one thing I took away from this movie is that when you watch this, you will be severely engaged. And I did say that about like Ghost of Frankenstein. But
Yeah,
this
there's
movie
things
in
happening, though.
particular, this movie in particular does such well to this point. And I'll make this point by covering the plot of The Return of the Vampire.
Well, all right, that sounds like a good idea.
So the movie starts with some text on screen that says the imagination of man at times sires the fantastic and the grotesque. That the imagination can soar into the stratosphere is attested by the return of the vampire. And when watching this, I said I got the Megamind Award.
Why does it have the Megamind Award?
Presentation.
Presentation!
But what's that from? What's that quote? The quote that it's quoting at the beginning of the movie is from the book that Bela Lugosi's character wrote. Is that right? It's like a little.
It's from Armin Tesla's book?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. If you look at it, actually the full quote, there's like a longer quote that I've seen, and it's from his book. It starts talking about vampires and stuff.
And that makes sense. But after the poor lady is swooped on by the vampire, we go on to these opening credits over a piece of music, which actually is pretty good. It's got nice structure. It's a very memorable motif.
Yeah, it's not bad.
The presentation was pretty good.
They did okay. I think it was very universal.
But this motif like appears throughout the entire movie, and it is very distinctive because it's da 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 da.
Yep.
Da 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 da, and you can hear that motif quite throughout, and it is pretty strong.
Are you gonna play? You gonna play a snippet? You gonna play a snippet of it right here?
Yes, I'm gonna be playing this over it, and the melody just sort of soars into the strings after this motif, and it just works quite well at presentation. So we pan over this nice graveyard, fairly marshy, fog, gnarled trees, over monologue introducing the story as an account of Armand Tesla, a vampire stalking the outskirts of London in 1918 from the Great War, from the perspective of Professor Walter Saunders of King's College, Oxford. We see a werewolf go into an abandoned cabin and awaken what seems to be Armand Tesla to tell him that the woman that he attacked in the very first 10 seconds is at Professor Saunders' clinic. And he doesn't like that, so he rushes over. We don't get to see his face at first because that makes sense, but this werewolf character whose name is Andreas really adds like a supernatural element sort of to the story because for reasons as we'll see.
We talked about Andreas a little bit in the production thing,
like
but
as a henchman, it's like he's a fairly unique character.
He's not just a normal crazy ghoul Renfield. He's a werewolf.
Yeah, he's a werewolf, but he is, cursed into the position where he is, and he doesn't really, or maybe he does want to in this case, but not under influence, he doesn't really want to be in the control, which makes him such a interesting character.
He is, but the thing that hits me about it is kept comparing it to Lon Chaney Jr.'s Lawrence Talbot Wolfman. With Larry Talbot, he's kind of growling and making animalistic noises, and he's not speaking like English with teeth in him. Yeah.
The Wolfman is a story where the character is mostly human throughout the story, but is only werewolf as a secondary position to who he is. In this movie, it is the opposite, where he is a werewolf for, I guess I don't know about a majority in this case.
For a little while, it's
a decent portion of the beginning and a decent portion of the end, but
when it counts, he's
a
werewolf,
secondary position. So that's sort of the comparison of that. Professor Saunders and his colleague Lady Jane Ainsley, baffled by what they regard as a severe case of anemia, find teeth marks on the neck of the patient upon her dying of shock, a la Dracula's daughter, because in Dracula's daughter there are many women who are like, I can see your eyes, you're right in front of me, you're gripping me, don't come near, oh! And then they die of shock. And they literally did that just like they did with Dracula's daughter.
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't definitely notice that.
In the case of the woman, for the first 10 seconds of the movie, I don't know if we get her name that much. I'll just call her 10 Seconds Lady.
First victim. Yeah, right.
First victim. Here we also get a small introduction to Nikki, the nurse, who becomes important later, and the two children that they have in this hospital clinic. They get attacked by Tesla in the night.
Thought Nikki was,
here, but they're not important later.
Nikki was the little
Nikki
girl
is important later
at this point, and right, she
no,
hasn't.
Nikki is the nurse.
No.
Nikki,
wait.
Is the victim.
She's not yet. Nikki's the little girl, and then she gets fog attacked or whatever, and then there's a time jump part, and she's older, and she's like right? Wait a second.
I could be wrong.
Okay, that's confusing. Yeah, Nikki Saunders. Yeah.
Yeah, happens to be the daughter of him. Actually,
Yeah.
with the daughter position, it could make sense that she's the child, but I'm just gonna gloss over that a little. Having read Armin Tesla's book and finding Nikki bitten too after this fog attack, Saunders and Ainsley search the only cemetery in the area and find Armin Tesla in a coffin. They determine he's a vampire with a mirror, and they spike him in the heart. It's an iron spike this time. Usually they do wooden stake, but the iron spike thing is like, I don't know, some new variation. They're like, we'll do an iron spike instead, like a big old nail.
Right. And the thing that affects the plot, I think, a little bit, but not too much, in the part where the main guy here is reading Armand Tesla's book, there's a picture of Bela Lugosi's face in there, like a penciled in drawing or some wood carving or whatever, woodcut, whatever. And Lady Jane, she doesn't see the picture of, if she did and like leaned forward just a little bit, she would like see, oh, that's what Armand Tesla looks like. And then later, if she sees him again, she'll be like, ah, that's the same guy.
But see, that's where that makes sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. You're saying just if she had peered over a little bit. But, that's how stories go in order for them to actually make sense.
The plot hole does get kind of filled in. But
yeah,
there's some...
it's not much of a plot hole. Good job on the writers.
Also, but there's a lot of movies that we see where if a character would make one little decision, the movie would just completely be done. If you didn't notice that,
but that's movies. What if Neo chose the blue pill?
There's no movie anymore, right?
Then there's no movie anymore, exactly. What if the butterfly that flew in the opening got stepped on? Then the camera couldn't pan over to the apartment building where the dude is changing out of putting pants on and going to school because it has to follow the butterfly there.
Wow.
That's how movies work.
But I think you just made a movie right there. That's insane.
I was sort of adapting the butterfly effect to my analogy.
It works. It does work.
But yeah, Andreas comes into the cabin with the groceries, and Tesla being dead, he falls to the ground and transforms into a human, his curse being broken.
And he does his groceries as a werewolf too, which is kind of interesting. He does his little. He's just like, I'm a werewolf, and I'm just gonna go get the dry cleaning. It's kind of okay, all right.
Cut forward 24 years as this was a, entire prologue section to, the main events of the movie.
Yeah, we got time skip. That's engaging. It's engaging, the time skip.
And it's World War II, and Saunders has just died in a plane crash.
The main guy.
Yes.
Right.
So here we get introduced to Sir Frederick, who is the Chief Commissioner of Scotland Yard, and he and Ainsley are discussing Armin Tesla. Frederick fears if Tesla was actually a human when they drove a spike through his heart, they might be charged for murder. Because, what if that was an actual human? What if, it is a decomposable body that you just murdered? And honestly, this is a quite, interesting dilemma. It's, very risky, Is it justifiable to take, such actions as, killing a vampire, just merely based on, supernatural belief? And, really, does the ends justify the means?
Right.
You killed a vampire, but so what if you get thrown into jail for it?
Well, yeah, and think about this, though. There's a movie that we might cover sometime in the future. It's got a lot of nods to Universal monster movies and stuff. It is a movie called Van Helsing, and it stars Hugh Jackman as Van Helsing. Anyway, the thing about Van Helsing is when he goes after these creatures, when he defeats them, sometimes they revert back to their human form. So when the townsfolk come over and go, hey, what's going on here, mate? And they see like a dead human. Van Helsing is standing over him. They're like, oh, look what you did.
I can cite the Wolfman. That happened in the Wolfman.
Right.
Where they found, it was Bela Lugosi also played that character. But he was like the traveling troupe guy. And
the Roman.
Yeah, and he, was a wolf, but then he beat him with the end of the cane, but he turned back into human form, and so they were like, oh, he just killed somebody, and now you're, sort of wanted.
Yeah, exactly. You can't prove that they were a werewolf before unless they're just laying there half werewolf, half man. You're like, oh, look, that's a werewolf. No, it just looks like a dude with torn up clothes with a silver thing beaten to his head or whatever. And you're just like, okay, well, you're just a straight up murderer then.
So that is honestly an interesting trope.
It is.
So in the 24 years that they had skipped over, Lady Ainsley has been keeping up the work, Saunders' work, now assisted by Andreas being his human assistant.
And he looks great for having, had 24 years pass.
And has had a son by the name of John, whom we learned is engaged to Nikki, was an Air Force pilot, and is now a musician. So it's been so many years that she managed to have children.
Yeah, another thing that I noticed, and I agree with some of the reviewers I've seen, where they said that the quote, old lady makeup was not amazing. It kind of looked like she had stayed up too late, bags under her eyes. I kind of excused it because, I think men allow more makeup to be put on them. I think we talked about this production part. I won't say anything more about it. But the old person makeup that they wore in the mummy's tomb would have been good here if they had found a way to make that work for her.
In this next scene, we get introduced to a unique device to this movie in which there are, because it is World War II and, there's war going on, there are bombing raids happening in this graveyard. So, they will be bombing it. And, we get to see all the people come forward and shoot the cannons, a la, things to come.
Yeah, and because there were bombing raids in England at the time.
Yeah, and really this element of war, it just adds this sense of, fear and uncertainty to the situation. Because it's like, oh, there's bombs going on. Okay, we've got to, account for this. Because in this movie, it happens, really suddenly. It's just like, alarms just randomly start up and go like, oh, bombing raid, whoop-de-doo,
Yeah, but you got to run for it. I mean, so
you got to run for it.
They're kind of used to it. They hear the alarms. You better take cover.
But after the bombing raid, our comedy relief, the cemetery workers, find Tesla's coffin uncovered by explosion, with the metal spike still in Armin Tesla's chest. Them being stupid, they remove it thinking it's bomb shrapnel, and so they bury him again. Meanwhile, Andreas is sent to retrieve a scientist named Hugo Bruckner, who escaped from a concentration camp to work with Lady Jane Ainsley. And that'll make sense in a moment. Back to the graveyard, and unfortunately, the spike's removal freed Tesla from death, and so he rises from the dirt. His hand, goes up. I was joking, he should have done a thumbs up.
Yeah. That's almost like a reverse of Terminator
Yeah.
at the end of Terminator 2. Yeah, the thumb coming up. That'd be great. He's like, I'm back.
Yeah.
I'm back.
So Armin Tesla rises from the dirt, ambushes Andreas, and curses him back under his control. He has been dominated again. His master plan is having Andreas kill Bruckner in order to disguise himself as Bruckner, go to the clinic, get closer to Nikki, and then through that ultimately kill Lady Ainsley, because he got his revenge against Saunders via the plane crash. He caused the plane crash, and so he wants to get onto Lady Ainsley through Nikki, through this disguise with Andreas.
And for some reason, he wants Nikki to be his bride forever. You know what it feels like? It feels like, the same kind of targeting that the Mummy's guy, whether that's, Mehmet Bey or whatever the other Bey or all these Bey guys, whatever their names are, whoever, Andoheb or whatever, they always pick a woman and go, okay, you're going to be the bride for eternity. And it's like, why did you pick her?
You're sort of sick of that?
No, I want to know what's so great about these ladies that he's picking. It's like, that you want to spend eternity with them. I mean, they need to be interesting. So he doesn't even know who Nikki is. Nikki, come here, Nikki.
He's just nicking her off.
Yeah, exactly. He's nicking her. I get right. Yeah.
So, Sir Frederick and Lady Ainsley head to the cemetery that morning. With Tesla's coffin missing, Tesla having relocated to the ruins of St. Matthias's church, Sir Frederick closes his investigation for lack of evidence. So he couldn't find the body because the body had disappeared and wandered off. It's called off for lack of evidence, and they don't go to court anymore. Yay. So they decide to have a party, rather John and Nikki's engagement party. Chopin's Prelude in E minor is in the background. Fairly stock piece. I immediately knew that I knew what it was when I heard it, if you get what I mean. And then I was like, what is this? I know what this is. People use it a lot for sad moments, because it is fairly sad, piece.
Yeah, kind of maudlin, yeah.
But yeah, I found it was Chopin. So there at the party, Ainsley and Nikki meet, quote, Bruckner, who wishes her...
How do you say it in England?
All the best.
He is invited into the lab where he sees Andreas there, working there, and they share looks because they
have
know.
to they have to act like Andreas has to act like, I don't know who this guy is. This is Bruckner, right? Serious. And he can look at him. He's kind of like a mixture between you're the master and you're more powerful than I, but also he's kind of scared but has to serve him. It's a mix of emotions, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Later, Professor Saunders' manuscript, which Fred wanted to give to Nikki, but Lady Ainsley locked it up to avoid Nikki having PTSD, was basically the story, has been stolen by Armand Tesla, or rather, his lackey, Andreas, and put into Nikki's room, where next scene she reads it. Tesla sneaks out of the professional club in order to, sort of give an alibi to her, like, I'm in this inn. Of course, Bruckner didn't commit anything, but he hops out the window, and he puts her under his domination. Next scene with epic amounts of fog and leaves
That's a
blowing into her
callback
room.
because that's how he came into a room when she was
yeah,
little.
but there was a lot of leaves coming in. I'm like, man, she is gonna have to clean up a lot when this is over.
Exactly.
She is found the next morning unconscious with puncture marks on her neck. Lady Jane questions the gravediggers. They tell her about the spiked body. She deducing Tesla is alive because obviously Tesla was there, but now he's not anymore. She goes to Sir Frederick, who dismisses, it all as, I don't believe in galloping ghosts is the line, I believe.
Right.
He dismisses the situation despite all the evidence. She's like, well, Armand Tesla is alive. Surely you'll believe me. And he's like, no, I won't believe in vampires at all.
Yeah, he's pretty skeptical the entire freaking movie. I mean, no matter what he sees.
So she leaves to care after Nikki, but the scene still remains on him because he, two gentlemen being in the room, he assigns the both of them to shadow Andreas at night in the shadow of darkness. So they find him in this alleyway and they grapple him, but he transforms into a werewolf as he does so and escapes. Fortunately, they did manage to get his bundle of groceries that he was carrying with him, which contained Bruckner's clothes in it. All of his paraphernalia. I haven't said that word before.
Paraphernalia.
Paraphernalia.
There you go.
I haven't ever had an excuse to say that word.
You do now.
I guess I'm one step closer to learning the Latin language, I guess.
Yeah, sure are.
Furthermore, earlier, a couple scenes ago, Frederick matches the wolf hair that he found earlier near the drawer the manuscript was stolen out of with the wolf hair they found on the alleyway road when they wrestled him. So he definitely knows Andreas was there. That night, Nikki is attended by a nurse where she says how she loves the night and the darkness. I guess that sort of comes into a bit more play later, but I don't
It's probably her only really good.
Me writing this plot didn't see it as important.
It's her only real, I think, good line. Because otherwise, she's just like, I've got to do it. I'm getting married. Da da da.
It gives her personality. I guess
it does. It shows her kind of, getting dominated and
Yeah, just after they fall asleep, Andreas jumps in the window and attacks the nurse. I think presumably kills her. Nikki is hypnotized by Arlen Tesla to go to John and kiss him.
Nikki.
Yeah.
Nick. It's funny hearing Bela Lugosi say
Arlen Tesla
Nikki.
Dramatically hiding in the window at the end of the scene. They're kissing, and then the camera pans left quickly to show him just peering in there. It reminds me a bit of Ghost of Frankenstein when
right, where his head popped his head up. Yeah,
when he popped his head in another
like,
window.
Hello.
Yeah, go check that episode out. That I believe was our second to last episode.
Yeah, that's a good movie. It's a good movie.
It's a pretty great movie.
Yeah.
And it's in its own right.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but so is this movie. I sort of have the same sort of feelings, but I was honestly more drawn in than in Ghost of Frankenstein. Honestly, you just need to watch it to really believe how engaging that it can be.
There's that word again.
There's the word again. I was trying to bring it full circle, I guess. There we are. Next morning, John has been bitten, and Nikki and the audience think that she did it. Because after all, she's like, oh, I love the night, and she was right there in the room and had kissed. And he was talking about, Nikki, why are you looking at me that way? But this is a bit of a red herring because Armand Tesla did it. So
right. Was she looking at his neck like, tasty? She's already starting to become a vampire in a way.
Well, I guess she was already sucking his soul out in a way, I guess.
Oh. Nice.
Lady Ainsley and Sir Frederick confront Andreas about the manuscript that he stole, and he was like, so what? Yeah, I'm under his control now. What are you gonna do about it? Heh heh heh, and he hops out the window. A la Cinderella 3. Most people have not seen Cinderella 3 except for that one meme of the Prince Eric, or Prince Charming, or whatever his name, just jumps out the window without any context.
I have not seen that. I need to check that out. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, people post that as a meme a lot. Might think of watching it, but I'm probably have other stuff on my plate. But that's a bit of a sidetrack. He hops out the window. They find the mirror turned in the other room, and Arma Tesla's ring on the floor. And also Bruckner not matching fake Bruckner's description, according to Sir Frederick Fleet. So the both of them deduce the truth that Bruckner is actually Armin Tesla in disguise. She questions Nikki about the situation, but there's nothing new of it, except Ainsley noting her cross necklace and going, oh, I know what to do now. So we're sort of getting...
I like that scene where she thinks about the cross. She, and I mentioned this in the production portion of this episode, but she is very... take charge and make decisions, and she has a lot of agency.
Were the first characters that we ever saw in this, and
yeah, Saunders
the other one died, so she is the main protagonist really of this.
Yeah, but so some protagonists are just like, the perpetual victim, and she's not a victim. She's like, I'm gonna get this guy. I know the weaknesses.
Yeah, giving me the vibes of that orange lady from like The Force Awakens. I don't know. She had a much more backseat in the story, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, I think so. I was also thinking about another female that has lots of agency and goes, well, I'm going to do something about this, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm not saying that Lady Jane is anywhere near Buffy Saunders, or whatever her name is, Summers. But it's not. I got it mixed up. But seeing that kind of arc of a female who is taking charge and figuring things out that she has the intelligence to do. I think that's pretty progressive, pretty forward of a movie to do.
Speaking of which, I was actually watching a video earlier about how the high definition remaster widescreen that they did was absolutely terrible because they didn't edit the effects right, and the color correction they didn't do any, and the cropping was absolutely horrendous.
Wow.
And then it talked about how the Star Trek The Next Generation remaster did everything right in that aspect, and now it has caused me to get into a rabbit hole of trying to find the Star Trek The Next Generation, the non-HD version, because I don't know if we've been watching the normal and not HD version, high definition. This is another rabbit hole we've gone into.
Welcome to
yeah, we're
format
going into
tangents.
Act 3 here. We're going into Act 3 here. Act 1 was the prologue. Act 2 is, the modern day, sort of stuff. And now that they, know the truth, here becomes Act 3, where Tesla and Lady Ainsley have a confrontation in the organ room. Tesla is threatening to turn Nikki and John into vampires. Actually, a lot like, Dracula's daughter, where it's like, I'm gonna take these and fly them away to, like, Transylvania and turn them into vampires, and that sort of confrontation. It reminds me of that.
Yeah, very much so. I found that, after watching this, I was like, there's a lot of similarities to Dracula's daughter.
But this time, Lady Jane has something up her sleeve, or rather, hidden behind the sheet music of the organ she's playing.
It's Jesus! It's the symbol of the Christ!
Exactly.
It compels
After her
you. The
warning
Christ.
Tesla that the power of goodness can destroy you, she unveils a glowing cross, which forces Tesla to vanish.
Yeah,
the funny thing is, it's
I
just
dig this.
sitting there, and he's just like, "Whoa!"
He
stares at it like a cat staring at a mouse.
I really do dig this scene. I think it's kind of cool. She's like, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition, and she's like, cross. She's like, surprise. Surprise! It's Jesus. All right.
But Tesla commands Nikki to leave the house, and Sir Frederick and Ainsley follow her, this being in the, middle of daylight. They meet Nikki, Tesla, and Andreas at the cemetery, but a spontaneous air raid happens, which causes Nikki to faint, and, them not being able to carry across their planes in the graveyard. Andreas carries her off, but with a bullet in his chest after Sir Frederick shoots him. He carries her into the ruins of the church, But Armin Tesla, having no need for him anymore, Tesla abandons him and tells him to die. And he's talks about, like, I'm gonna make her, a vampire, and I have no use for you. Go die in the corner. And so he does. He crawls into a corner.
That's so mean. That's so mean. He's like, I've served you so well all these years, including the 24 years that I just decided to hang out, and you're just gonna tell me go lay down in the corner and die. It's like, okay, no, that's so sad.
Yeah. But this is where his, character arc truly shines, which was actually pretty surprising. I was like, dude, this dude has a character arc? Man. But, so Andreas crawls in the corner, but, actually a lot of this comes from convenience, but, the character arc moment comes, like, after this one part. I guess I'm excusing it slightly. He finds a crucifix just buried in the dirt. So that he can turn human again. But this is where he holds it against Tesla with an epic, speech. And it is honestly pretty epic. We might play it here.
You are my master no longer. You are evil. You must be destroyed. For years I've lived in terror of you. I'd wake up screaming in the night because I thought you had come back. And I was your slave again. Because I forgot what Dr. Ainsley had taught me. Now that is over.
But unfortunately,
I am going to
his
destroy
character
you
arc is
forever.
interrupted by a bomb exploding the church and exposing Tesla to the rising sun, where he is spiked in the heart by Andreas, and he melts in the bones. In the neatest effect I've seen since Invisible Man Returns. Sort of like how in the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, he just melts into a skull, into a wax skull. And it looks like really cool, like melting, convincing.
Yeah, I
melting
wanted
effect.
them to focus on it more, but I understand why with the Hays Code and all this kind of stuff where they're trying to, we don't want anybody to see that. At least not until
Honestly, why hasn't
1981.
Universal done something like this before? This sort of effect before. We haven't seen Universal do
I
anything
don't know.
like it except Invisible Man Returns.
Maybe Columbia Pictures could take a little bit more of a leap. They could kind of do that and kind of come under the radar. I don't know.
But he just, turns into a puddle of soup.
He does, really.
Though we don't, see the full effect because Ainsley and Frederick arrive on the scene, where Andreas has died of his bullet wound. Nikki tells Sir Frederick and Lady Jane that Andreas saved her life, and finding the skeleton, we don't get to see, the middle of the effect. We get to see him start to melt and then end melting.
Right.
They find the skeleton, but Frederick wouldn't believe it is Tesla, because after all, it's just a skull, so he never saw it was Armin Tesla's face. The movie ends by him staring at the camera and asking us if we believe in the vampires, because they're like, oh, surely you believe in this. And he's like, no, I don't. And he's like, well, we do.
He's like,
and
do
then he
you?
turns into the camera and he's like,
And do you people?
Right,
sort
right.
of a comedic sort of ending. It's a
It's
has
a fourth
anyone
wall.
got a match? Sort of
Yeah,
ending.
oh, that's right. It is kind of a fourth wall break, and a lot of movies did that. I do think that it kind of, I don't know, it kind of took me out of the movie for a moment. I was like, say what? And I kind of thought it was funny. And I know that people are like, watching the movie going, oh, he's talking to. If I were to tell the director, hey, he wants to do that, and you're like, no, I would have told him not to. I'm, kind of a rim shot, ba-doom-joom, kind
But
of
it is honestly a pretty neat story. It has its own, like, atmosphere, which I quite like. It is honestly, you wouldn't believe that it is a B picture, but it is a B picture.
Yeah.
And it's like, just because of how, optimized they could do things is, just made the experience just flow with so much, creativity, I guess, through lack of word of saying that it was, different feeling.
Well, let's put it this way. I do think this is like a cover band playing a classic song by the band that they're covering, that they're doing, and they even dress like them and everything, and they do a really good cover. It's almost like such a good cover that it's its own thing. What I'm saying is that this is Columbia's cover of a Universal style movie, and they do a good job of it with even, not even as much money as Universal would probably be able to throw at it. And I think it's a very underrated movie, because I thought it was pretty good.
It's like, imagine 9 Inch Nails covering, I don't know, like, All-Star by Smash Mouth, or like, Watermelon
gosh.
Sugar or something.
Oh my goodness.
It's different, but it honestly is sort of an upgrade in its own way.
I
You wouldn't
follow
believe
you.
it.
I follow you.
Though honestly, I feel like 9 Inch Nails wouldn't be, I feel like it would just be doing it for, the neatness of it.
Yeah, I don't think they would do that. But here the thing is, this movie is not, it's not as known as it should be. And I think that one of the things that keeps that from happening
we
is
didn't even hear about this movie except when we had a hole in our schedule and went, oh, well, let's think of a movie that came out in 1943 that has, Bela Lugosi or Boris Karloff in it, and we found this, and we were like, this is gonna work, and then we watched it, and we're like...
And it worked pretty well.
This is an experience that no one has really experienced, And, we're just one more on top of the pile of the, not very many people watching or seeing or covering.
It's not as famous as his Dracula work or his work in Frankenstein, and I think it deserves to be known a little better.
I feel like the likeliest place would be, like, if a film school is doing, like, let's cover, like, literally everything and anything Bela Lugosi was in, then it would get on that. But honestly, just, like, it just feels like, sort of that grab-baggy sort of experience that you go, like, okay, we're gonna get into just random, game, and then it's an experience that is great. And, but no one has really experienced it that much before.
It does. A lot of people, when you talk to them about these movies, they don't remember some of those. They're not as well known. They're still trying to kind of go, hey, we can do Universal style movies too. And the thing is, Universal could learn a lot from people trying to do their style. I will say that this was a good comeback of a Dracula style character from Bela Lugosi, but it's diminishing returns for him. Like I said before, is you're going to start seeing him in more like B Pictures and Monarch and PRC and stuff as his career is kind of going down. He's doing cheaper and cheaper pictures. He's not making as much money. He's kind of doing things to kind of stay in the public eye a little bit. And Boris Karloff still gets decent work, even into his old age. It started with Roger Corman pictures, but it still starts to fade down as well. And
so, yeah, we are seeing really the death of that era, but we really get to, compared to, the other things we've been doing lately, where it's just like rehashes of the previous things or like reboots, that we get to, capture some of those old feelings we had earlier in the season. And speaking of which...
Yeah.
Talking about, experiences people probably haven't, heard of as much. Things to come. And honestly, The Shape of Things to Come, you wouldn't really think of that as H.G. Wells' book on the top of your head. You'd think, some of his other works, like Invisible Man or War of the Worlds.
Yeah,
but this
Time
one
Machine.
Sort of sneaks into the, background. But when we watched the movie, it was just, this really, early instance of an epic sci-fi, scale that we don't really get to see until the 60s, into the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, exactly.
And this early, I was like, man, this is like extremely epic and like all the effects and stuff.
Yeah, so
who knew? Another one was Dr. Cyclops. Honestly, having not heard of it before, it did something fairly, unique that we, again, wouldn't see into, like, 50s and 60s with, like, The Incredible Shrinking Man.
That's true.
It was truly unique in its own right.
We're going to see some more of those stuff going forward, too. Like, okay.
The Adventures of Robin Hood. Timeless.
Yes.
That's the third thing I'll say. Adventure of Robin Hood. Timeless.
Plus, it was one of the earliest times we had ever seen, like a live-action Robin Hood that was done pretty faithfully. And the music was great. It honestly, a color movie of this style, it made me think of the color movies of the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, this is a Robin Hood that is, still survived in the hearts and minds of the people for 70 more years since it came out.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that we think of when we think of Robin Hood, you're thinking of this movie. I mean, even the designs of the stuff from the Walt Disney movie is using a lot of the designs that were done for that film.
But yeah, this is
1938.
Probably a core memory for a lot of people, probably, having the likelihood of seeing it, like on a VHS or something, watching it with, some of your parents, just this, timeless classic, or maybe it was another Robin Hood movie, who knows?
Right, and one thing that was very interesting is we had comedies that we did. One of them was intentionally funny. One of them was unintentionally funny, and that was The Ape. The Invisible Woman actually was a comedy. It had funny elements in it, and I did find myself, liking the lighthearted nature of it. The Ape was not meant to be funny, but oh my goodness, did I laugh? Did I lose my mind? Did I have 5 different emotions while watching this with you?
Because of how just nothing truly made any sense.
No.
It just broke down at a level.
Yeah, and so did my brain at one point. And I honestly, if somebody wants to know if somebody wanted a scientific study of what it sounds like for someone's brain to break, I think they could listen to our episode and kind of map the human brain's degradation over over an hour. I would just show somebody this movie if as soon as the last 10 minutes start up, I turn to look at them to see their expression as they watch this, and their face scrunches up in absolute kind of confusion.
Yeah, and we argued over this movie for 15 minutes past
But we were both right, though. I think that it was more. It wasn't that we were against each other in terms of what we thought. I think that we just we're trying to puzzle this out, kind of go, why, dear Lord, why? And that's why I enjoyed it. It was so memorable. The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde episode was a landmark for us because it was a comparison. We were comparing the original and a remake, all together, and we had such a deep dive on that just editing the episode was
I wrote it all down, and then sort of coming back to it during the recording it, and I'm like, wait a minute. I'm gonna have to be comparing all of this and the sort through these paragraphs, and I'm like,
it was a challenge, but we made it through. And honestly, if somebody's willing to listen to the full episode and really take it in, and especially if they've seen both films, they'll understand where we're coming from and how we did that. The black cat and how transgressive it was and how weird. And just it was just so stylish and weird, and that was our first movie kicking off season 2. So that we started off with a weird one, and that's the way I like it. But I'm really looking forward to season 3 and our next bonus month. We'll let it be a surprise for you guys. We're either going to do Guns and Gangsters, which will be 4 movies that have criminals. Sometimes either the mafia or just a criminal in general that seedy side, that underbelly of law and order and society.
And the official list of that will be The Public Enemy, Little Caesar, Scarface, and Key Largo as our 4 movies for that.
The Public Enemy came out in 1931. It stars James Cagney.
We will be watching some James Cagney stuff, and we also get some Humphrey Bogart and Key Largo.
We do. And of course, remember, we mentioned James Cagney played Lon Chaney in The Man of a Thousand Faces. We did drop that in the Phantom of the Opera episode. Yeah.
That's what we'd be doing on the audio side, but we also have some plans for expanding some of the things that we're doing on the video side. Do tell. And that consists of more reaction videos. We're going to start reacting to old serials, which I believe will consist of the old Batman serial.
Yep, the one that came out in the 40s, yeah.
We will have Tarzan the Fearless, which it was actually a suggestion from the comments on our YouTube video that said that would be cool to do. And we were like, we could do that. So we'll be doing that. We'll also be doing some Dick Tracy, which is classic, really sort of content.
And this is new for me because I haven't seen any of the Dick Tracy serials. I'm familiar with the character, and I've read some of the old comic strips that he came from, and I saw the movie that came out in the 90s that had Warren Beatty and Madonna in it. I remember that movie from when I was younger. I read a lot of that stuff. So I have not seen those serials, so that's going to be news to me too. So again, if you want something that I've never seen before and you've never seen before, that's probably one of those ones.
Yeah, and to lastly announce is a sort of idea that we have been brewing up in particular. As you all know, the two of us are nostalgia junkies. I mean, I guess we could profess that by the fact that we're covering a movie right now that's a century old.
Yeah.
So we are really nostalgic. We are hundreds of years old nostalgic.
We're nostalgic for movies, but also for another type of media that's a little more interactive, would you say?
Yes. So we plan to unveil on our YouTube channel a small little series we'll be doing occasionally called Flicks to Joysticks, whereupon we will be, exploring some of the video game industry as it relates to the movies that we watch. Because I sort of believe that that is sort of a way we can sort of explore the history of the movies as, the history of the video games. Like, what were they like? They were, a lot of them, were quite, rushed out at that time to, meet demands. And so they were absolutely terrible. And grueling experiences that we will have to sit through.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, what I was thinking, well, okay, intellectual properties, right? IP, which would be like movies, comic books, TV shows, things like that.
Yeah, video games along with that are all, you can consider them merchandise to
in a way,
their
yeah.
respective IP.
They're almost advertising for the movie, too.
There's sort of advertisement as well. Like how, the same as you would buy, a Back to the Future DeLorean keychain, you would have the video game to play on your little Nintendo Entertainment System at home back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And you play that sucker on a CRT TV, and you get to do some of that. Also, a particular experience as many people have with DOS, which is the really old 90s, it was all this text-based stuff that they just, made for this format. It's quite old, but it had a lot of, adventure games, point-and-click adventure games that were very classic to many different people, like The Secret to Monkey Island.
Yeah, those old LucasArts games, and I have fond memories of the X-Wing versus TIE Fighter games from back when I was young.
In particular, there were a lot of, games sort of along that end, and there is also happens to be an Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade game, which people are quite nostalgic for, that we will be doing some of those.
Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll kind of just we'll kind of play the game through. We'll react to it and comment on it as we go.
Do you remember the Oregon Trail?
Yes,
was a really old game that many people played on their Apple IIs, which were these like boxy, predecessor to
and because it was so historically
the Macintosh.
And because it was so historically kind of accurate, they would even let you play that at school.
You would
sometimes.
die of dysentery,
yes,
and snakes, and literally anything.
Starvation, cannibals.
Even the screenshots that you could see would give you so much, anxiety, being like, oh, I remember dying to this so much. I couldn't, get past Texas without a single snake, dislodging a wheel and then bandits coming.
Right.
A lot of fond memories of that many people do have, and that we, would really like to recapture that experience and, explore this time capsule.
We're trying to keep our sights on.
We will keep our wits about
games.
us. In fact, we will only be doing
games based upon IP. Right. We're not doing every IP, but we will do a lot of them.
But we will mostly be doing, as we said, Indiana Jones, various Marvel games.
Back to the Future, Batman. There's some good Batman games and some frankly terrible ones, but we're going to have fun doing both, both the good ones and the bad ones. I can't wait till you play the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game for NES. I want to see if you can get past all that. A lot of those games are very challenging, and I think that, it's going to be a lot of fun. And honestly, one reason why I decided to do it, or had the kernel of an idea. I won't say it was all me, but I really, William is more of a gamer than I am now. But I used to play a lot when I was younger. My nostalgia factor for these things is making me want to expose him to some of those older things. And what better way to do it than make it, than choose the things that are related to some of the movies we might actually be doing, like science fiction, horror and adventures, things that we might be talking about. So, and I figured, why not? That's the thing. Why not?
And a good instance of, some of the historical exploration that I believe I can recall in my head is Lego Star Wars, the video game, which came out in 2005. Most people nowadays would be playing the Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga, which is a game that combined both, trilogies into one, because this used to be Lego Star Wars the video game, which was the prequel trilogy, and then Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, which, of course, was the original trilogy. And then they combined it for the Complete Saga, and that is what most people are playing today. Now, this applies for both of those games, but in this case, we were talking about the one that came out in 2005 in March. And for those who look at the Wikipedia pages, might notice a sort of, gap there is because this game actually came out a month and a half before Revenge of the Sith came out. So, if you're playing the game and you're wondering, why in the first level, where you are rescuing Palpatine, is there's just this random pipe that you go through to transition to the next area, and that's just a random inclusion. That was actually a deleted scene from Revenge of the Sith, because they had not, cut the scene before the game came out, and so people got to experience the entire plot of Revenge of the Sith in Lego form a month and a half before the movie came out, which is sort of hilarious.
Yeah, that's not always what happened with a lot of these games. You wouldn't have to worry about it spoiling the movie.
But it's interesting. It speaks into the history of Revenge of the Sith itself, and
no,
how
it does.
Many of the scenes they cut fairly late in the the post-production process. They were like, we can't do these. For instance, the third or fourth level, I recall at the very beginning, you are going through I believe it's you and Yoda and Obi-Wan. You are going into like the temple, and there are a bunch of stormtrooper people in Jedi cloaks, and you wonder what is up with that. That was a deleted scene too. Before they had even cut it is when this movie came out, and so they're like they're still developing the movie as we're making this game, so we're gonna keep sort of this stuff and keep it sort of updated to where it is then. It's sort of speaking to the history of, the development process of Revenge of the Sith, and how many of these scenes were all cut at the end and never made it into the final picture.
Right. And those are things that we're going to discuss and talk about as we go through those. So, anything else that you want to talk about?
Oh, and furthermore, the Revenge of the Sith part of LEGO Star Wars, the video game, actually used the original series music because they didn't have the Revenge of the Sith soundtrack. But in the complete saga, they actually add in the Revenge of the Sith soundtrack. Just thought you might want to know that. That's cool.
Spitting facts.
Yeah, honestly, we, not only us, but this podcast has grown quite a bit, because after all, we're already announcing, like, all these things that are going to happen at the end of the season that we're planning on doing, I feel like we just have this addition, to the world and what we've been doing. It's sort of this, compounding addition that is just so lovely to experience. And we're going to experience more of it when we get into our third season. But this season is coming to a close. And, 20 episodes. Man, a lot to edit.
Yes, but we want to thank... First of all, I want to thank you, William, for this experience. I also want to thank our listeners, those that are vocal, those that are not vocal. Hey, you know what? We see you. We know you're there. We thank you for listening, and you know what? We're getting better and better every time we do this. I am superly looking forward to doing the reactions and doing the Let's Plays of some of these games, because it's going to be something a little bit different. We did go into reactions a little bit with the Indiana Jones
and
movies
we sort
that we
of
did.
tested a little bit out in our live streams how
Out, yeah.
some of those plans and ideas we've been having to work.
We played games on live streams, which kind of was a test
bad
out
I
of this.
am at space shooter games, and how much better I am at the classic Mario Brothers.
Right, yeah, you're a platforming fool. But hey, as most good things must come to an end, this episode, this ultimate...
As the rain enters
the
soil.
This has been Season 2 of Cinematic Fantastic. And we hope to see you again soon on various platforms. Cool.
Indeed, on the flip side.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Cinematic Fantastic Podcast. Click here and here for some more excellent content. Hope you'll enjoy it. See you soon.